Hello everybody, this is Unit 5, Formative 1, Day 1, Factoring. In this video we're going to be looking for GCF, or Greatest Common Factor. Remember, factors are numbers that go into other numbers. So the factors of 12, numbers that go into 12, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And then the numbers that go into 14, or the factors of 14, are 1, 2, 7, and 14. So to find the GCF of 12 and 14, we're going to look at the biggest factor they have in common. So the biggest factor they have in common is 2. So the greatest common factor of 12 and 14 is going to be 2. Now for this next one, for 36x squared and 48x, to find the GCF when there's a variable, we're going to do the same thing. So the first thing we're going to do is look at our whole numbers. So 36 and 48. We're going to find the biggest number that goes into these two numbers, and that's going to be 12. You can write out your factors if you need to. Just make a list like we did up here. And then for our variables, we have x squared, which is x times x, and then over here we just have an x. So to find the most they have in common, we know they have 1x, and that's all they have in common. This one doesn't have any more x's over here. So then my GCF of this one is going to be 12x. And for variables, you're always going to look at the smallest exponent they have. So this one has a 1, so I know my GCF is going to have an exponent of 1. Let's say we had 2x to the third and 4x to the fourth. First thing we're going to do is look at those whole numbers again. So I have 2 and 4. So the biggest number that goes into 2 and 4 is going to be 2. And then for my variable, we're going to look at the smallest exponent. So my smaller exponent is 3 right here. So I know my GCF is going to have an exponent of 3. Okay, for these ones we're going to do the same thing. We're going to factor out a GCF. So we're going to factor out the biggest factor of these ones. We're going to start with number 1. We have 6x plus 12. So the biggest number that goes into 6 and 12 is 6. And then they both don't have an x, so I can't take an x out. So if I take a 6 out of here and a 6 out of here, if I divide 6x by 6, my 6's cancel out, and I'm left with 1x, and then 12 divided by 6 is going to be 2, so plus 2. And when I factor something out, it's the opposite of distributing. So if I was going to distribute this back out, I have 6 times 1x, which would be 6x, and then 6 times 2 would be plus 12. So when you distribute it back in, you should get the same thing as your original answer. This is a good way to check your work, too, if you go back and distribute that through. Now for this next one, for number 2, we have negative 5x squared plus 25x to the third minus 45x. So for this one, I have a negative leading exponent, or leading number. So I'm going to factor out a negative, and I know 5 goes into all these terms. So I'm going to factor out a negative 5 out of all 3 of these terms. And then if I look at all 3 terms, I can see that each one of them has an x. So this one has an x squared, this has an x cubed, and this has an x. So my smallest exponent on my x's is 1. So I can factor out an x to the first power. So now I'm going to divide these. So I have negative 5x squared divided by negative 5x. So my negative 5's cancel out, so I'll have a 1 left. And then x squared divided by x, remember when we divide, we subtract our exponents. So we're going to have 2 minus 1, so we'll just have an x left for our first term. Now when we go to our second term, we have 25 divided by negative 5. So 25 divided by negative 5 is negative 5. And then again, when we divide, remember we subtract our exponents. So we have 3 minus 1, it's going to be x squared. And then when we go to our third one, we have negative 45. Divided by negative 5, we're going to have plus 9. And then x divided by x, remember our x's cancel out. So that's going to be our answer when we factor. And again, to check our work, we can distribute this negative 5x. So negative 5x times 1x is going to be negative 5x squared. And then negative 5x times a negative 5x squared will have plus 25 x to the third. Remember when you multiply, you add those exponents. And then I'm going to distribute it to this 9. So then I'll have negative 45x, which is what we started with. Okay, here's our last problem. So we have negative 12x to the third y to the third minus 24xy plus 36y squared. So the first thing we're going to start with is our whole numbers out front. So I have a negative 12, a negative 24, and a 36. So I want to find my greatest common factor, or my GCF of these three. So I can look at them. If you need to make a list of your factors, you can do that. I know that negative 12 is the biggest one that goes into each one. I'm going to take a negative because there's this negative out front. So I'm going to take the negative out. And now I'm going to go to my x terms. So I'm going to look at the x's of each one. I have an x there, and there's no x in my third term with this 36y over here. There's no x over here. So I can't factor an x out because it's not in all three terms. So now I'm going to look at my y's. So I have a y in this one, I have a y right here, and I have a y over here. So now I'm going to look at their exponents. Remember, that's a 1 up there. So I'm going to look at their exponents. I have a 3 for this one, for the first one, with y to the third here, y to the first here, and y to the second here. Remember, when we factor out, we're going to take the one with the smallest exponent. So the smallest one is just to the first, so I'm going to take out a y to the first. So I'm going to divide each one of these by negative 12, y to the first, so for my first term, when I divide by negative 12y, our negative 12's cancel out and just become a 1. Our x to the third, we don't have another x to the third, so it just stays x to the third. Then remember, when we are dividing y to the third divided by y to the first, we're going to subtract our exponents. So y to the third divided by y to the first. So 3 minus 1, we're going to have y to the second left. Now for our second term, I'm taking negative 24 divided by negative 12. So negative 24 divided by negative 12 is going to be a positive 2. Then my x is just going to come to my answer because I'm not dividing by any more x's. And then when I divide y to the first divided by y to the first, those are going to cancel out. So I'm done with my second term. Now I'm going to go to my third term. So I have 36y squared divided by negative 12y. So 36 divided by negative 12 is going to be negative 3. And then y squared divided by y to the first. Remember, when we divide, we're going to subtract those exponents. So 2 minus 1 is just going to be 1 left. And now I'm going to check my answer to make sure I factored right. So I'm going to distribute this again. So negative 12y times 1x to the third, y to the second. Negative 12 times 1 is negative 12. And then I'm going to have x to the third, and then y to the first times y to the second. Remember, when you multiply, you add those exponents. I'm going to have y to the third. Now I'm going to distribute it to my second term. Negative 12 times 2 is going to be negative 24. Then I'm just going to have x, y. Can't combine those because those are different variables. Now I'm going to distribute it to this third term. So I'm going to have negative 12 times negative 3. So negative 12 times negative 3 is plus 36. And then y times y is going to be y squared. So then if you look again, it's our answer from the beginning. So that's how you do those ones. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.